I'm just going to give you a bit of an insight into my journey and how I came to be a business owner and an entrepreneur here in Cairns as well. I'm not unfamiliar to this space here. I have worked with people, I've trained people here at the Ideas Lab. We've also attended other events in here as well, so it kind of feels like home. So just a little bit about me. I have been in the media for around about 30 years. Mostly with the ABC, and it's been a long journey for me. So the business side of my career has only been the last few years, so I'm still a young entrepreneur, if not young in age. So now I'm the co-director of Emotion Video Training and Production, and you'll hear a little bit more about what our business does a little bit later. And my most recent feather in my cap is I'm now an author. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how that all happened, because that was not something that I expected to happen in my life, but I am very glad that it has. And just a bit of a fun fact, I'm also a salsa dance teacher. So I think it's really important as humans to have many interests, and that's one of mine. So actually being a salsa teacher was my very first business, and it's my oldest business. So I have actually been a teacher since 2004. I came back from 2 years in the UK when salsa was absolutely hot and at its peak, and I learnt all the things from the teachers over there, and I came back to my little outback desert community of Alice Springs, and people were begging me. They said, "Can you please start teaching? We need to have this here." So that is how I fell into my first business as a salsa dance teacher. So I have now been going for, oh my goodness, it's 20 years this year. So that's just a little bit about my history. But seriously, all I ever wanted to do was be a journalist. So you might recognise the lady on the left-hand side of the screen, Jana Wendt. So what's she doing there? Well, when I was 9 years old, my grandfather, my last surviving grandparent, he died when I was 10. We used to love writing to each other, writing letters, writing poems, writing short stories. And he said to me, "You know what, you remind me of Jana Wendt." So that really planted the seed for me of becoming a journalist, and it really lit a fire in me. So everything I did from 9 years old was geared towards becoming a journalist. That's all I ever wanted to do. So all the way through school, I was writing and reporting. In fact, at the end of my high school certificate in New South Wales, I had done a 2-year project as part of my Society and Culture Studies on violence in schools, and taken an in-depth dive into that issue, and had interviewed my father, who was unfortunately assaulted while he was teaching at a school, and another teacher who was involved in the same incident, and how that had impacted both of them in a different way. And that report ended up getting tabled in the New South Wales Parliament and becoming part of the discussion around violence in schools in New South Wales and how to tackle that issue. So even from a young age, I sort of had that drive to research, dive deeper, and become a journalist. And I had a choice when I left school. I did quite well. I got into the degree that I wanted to get into at University of Technology, Sydney. I went for 3 days, but I was also hedging my bets going for newspaper cadetships as well. So I ended up getting a cadetship. In fact, we did the interview. I think it went okay, but then the boss calls me up and he said, "Are you 18? And I'm thinking, what the hell does that have to do with anything? And it was still the culture where journalists and newsrooms in general were still very blokey. So I had a male newspaper editor and male colleagues, and I said, what do you need to know for? And he said, because we go to the pub every lunchtime and play pool, and that's where we talk about stories, and we get one up on the other newspapers, etc. So I got the job because I was 18, but hopefully because of my interview. That image in the centre is just to reflect on the fact that my grandfather was actually a businessman as well. So he brought the Villa Wool Company to Australia many eons ago from England. And the third image is the book by Tim McCartney Snape, who was the first Australian to summit Everest, and also the only person, as far as I know, to have walked from the sea to the summit of Everest. So there was a little early seed, I suppose, and I was only reflecting on this recently, a little early seed planted about Nepal as well, and that sense of adventure. So I grew up on Western Sydney. My life was fairly small there when it began. But of course, working in journalism gives you the chance to really get behind the scenes in many people's lives and go to places that you never thought you would end up. Which is a nice segue to how I ended up in Alice Springs. So my goal was always to work for the ABC. It was and I think still is the pinnacle of the media in this country, and was very proud to have a 15-year career with the ABC. But I had to go all the way from Sydney to Central Australia to start my career. I'd done 300 hours of work experience for the 7:30 Report, as it was known then, and ABC Illawarra while I was finishing my master's degree, which I did after a stint on the newspaper and working for a government minister. And then, yes, was ready to get my hands dirty, moved to the centre of Australia, didn't know a soul, and got to cover some incredible stories while I was out there. So fantastic learning ground, and I suppose anybody that is not from Cairns and has moved here to study or work knows the opportunities that you get in places like this. It's just different. You get to do all of the things, you get to stretch yourself, and you get to meet new people who have a similar outlook on life, have similar values, and challenge you in ways and challenges that you wouldn't normally experience in a capital city perhaps. So these are just some of the stories that I got to cover while I was out there. Royal visits. I had to ride a camel in the Camel Cup for a story once. That was pretty fun. I was there when Peter Falconio and Joanne Lees were murdered / abducted. So we had the entire world's media on our doorstep then. Lots of native title decisions, and also the handback of the Devil's Marble from Flynn's grave to the Devil's Marbles. The federal intervention, of course, which was huge in Aboriginal affairs in the Northern Territory with ripple effects elsewhere, and the landing of the Olympic torch in Uluru. So they're just some of the fun stories that I got to cover while I was there. But it wasn't all good news, and I moved to Cairns for a bit of a different challenge, to become more of a leader in the ABC. So I was leading up the newsroom, and then was chief of staff for a while. But there were a couple of events that I had to cover. By now I'd had years and years of covering things like murders and quite traumatic events, natural disasters, and it was a couple of events that I covered here that really started to chip away at my mental health, and one of them was the deaths of the 8 children in Murray Street, which happened just before Christmas in 2014, and then about 6 months later I was the first camera woman on scene. So just a quick recap. When I became part of the ABC, I was a radio journalist, but technology and the media landscape has evolved so much. We now live in a 24-hour news cycle, and in order to feed the media, you need to be multi-skilled. So I went from being a radio journalist to a bi-media journalist, writing for online, and then when I moved here, we also were taught camera skills, given a camera, and it was off you go. So I was actually filming TV packages as well. So I was already up on the tablelands when the JCU Cafe disaster happened, and I was the first camera woman on scene. And that had a real impact on me, and started to notice some personality changes in the months after that. So it all kind of culminated in me needing to take a break and actually stepping away. So I thought, what do I do now? I just had to stop, and I had to reset and basically start again. And at that point, I didn't know what the future held for me. I didn't have any ambitions for myself. I thought my journalism career is over. Perhaps all kinds of careers are over for me. Wasn't sure at all what the next step was going to be. So I just stopped, and I slept, and I recalibrated. I started volunteering because I thought that's something I can do to help myself. So I know you've got the Turtle Rehabilitation Centre out here at JCU. Well, I was volunteering when they had the facility at Portsmouth for the turtles that were very sick when they first came in. And I would go there and I would clean the tanks, talk to the turtles, and that started sort of redeveloping my sense of community and my sense of self. But ultimately, one story that I'd done at the ABC in 2015 led me on a path that I'm on now, and that was to interview Som Tamang. So in the bottom right-hand corner, Som, if you don't know him, he's the founder of Friends of Himalayan Children, which is a humanitarian organisation started and based here in Cairns, which assists children in Batasi village, Nepal, Som's village, to go to school. Som only got to go to school to grade 5 in his village, and in the pursuit of furthering his education, he ended up in child slavery in Kathmandu. And he eventually escaped from that situation, and he vowed for that not to happen to his siblings and also ultimately the rest of his village. So I interviewed Som after the earthquake in 2015 when the school was destroyed and basically all of the buildings in his village were destroyed, including the children's hostel. Thankfully, none of the children died. As I continued following his return visits to and from Nepal, I got to know a bit more about what he did. And having covered lots of natural disasters, I thought there's this outpouring of support just after disasters, but the need is much longer than that. So it wasn't until about 18 months after that, when I was in my own personal crisis, that I decided, well, I will go to Nepal, I will spend a month in Batasi village as a teacher. And that did two things. It made me realise that I still had something to give, that I had a passion for training and teaching, and that I needed to write this man's incredible story. I saw the impact of his work firsthand. So I came back healed and invigorated to start a new chapter. And so in 2017, I started my second business, regional media training, and decided to create a business connecting organisations and people with the skills to engage with the media, get their stories out into the media. So that was really the path that I wanted to go on now. I wanted to have my own business. I wanted to be a media trainer. I stayed at the ABC for another few months, but ultimately I just wanted to move on with my new life. I segued into Queensland Health, doing communications for a few years, but ultimately I knew that I had this book in me that I had to get out. So I decided to leave the workforce in mid-2020 and start to write the book full-time. And almost as soon as I made that decision, I ended up getting a grant from the Cairns Regional Council, a Regional Arts Development Fund grant. So that was the universe saying, this is the right path for you. So here I am in 2018, actually going back to Nepal to gather all the interviews for the book. I didn't realise I'd have to go to Everest Base Camp to do this, but it just so happened that there was a trek for women only from Cairns to Everest Base Camp to raise money for the first community library, and I thought, what better way to immerse myself in Som's world, because he was a trekking guide, spend some time with him, get to know some of the women that he's helped and saved from trafficking and child marriage. And a great thrill for me was many of the women guides that were accompanying us on the trek, because Som has a trekking company called Take on Nepal. Many of those women guides I'd actually taught 2 years before, so it was a really nice full circle experience. So the book interviews were finally happening. But there was another business burning inside of me, so I ended up starting to collaborate with Susie Cray, who I met at the ABC and who was a very experienced editor, trainer, camera woman. And we decided that we wanted to get together to create an innovative business that not only did videography for people, but actually taught people how to do the thing. So we're all carrying smartphones now. We've all got the capacity to share our stories using a tool that we carry around all the time. And we thought, how good would it be if we actually taught people like yourselves how to use that for great effect, to tell your stories, to record your research, to share more widely with the world. So here we are in the pandemic. We've just started our business. We're all guns blazing, ready to do our workshops, and then everything got shut down. So we're actually out here in 2020 delivering a workshop for JCU with no one in the room. We're just using the facility, and we're actually training people who were in Townsville, on Magnetic Island, and in Singapore. So it was great to finally kick off the business and know that we could pivot with the business. So we essentially travel the country now delivering our workshop to people no matter where they are, and because we want everyone to be able to have this skill to be able to share their stories. So we're regularly back and forth to the territory. We went to Launceston in Tasmania last year, and I'm pleased to say that we're starting to pick up some awards for the work that we do, mainly around innovation. So we've just been named a finalist in the Australian Women's Small Business Champion Awards. We've won a couple of other innovation awards this year, and our first award was the Collaboration of the Year for the Cairns Business Women's Club Awards, and that award ceremony for this year is happening this Friday night. So we're extremely proud of our journey in business and where we are now and what we can offer to people like yourselves. And I know that we have one of our students here in the crowd, so good to see you. Back to the book, because that was still on the burner. So I'd done the interviews and finally got the chance to immerse myself in this at the same time as we were growing the business. So after all of the angst that's involved in writing a book and then trying to get it published, Himalayan Dreams was actually launched earlier this year. And as a new author, the fear was, is anyone going to like this book? Is anyone going to buy it? Is anyone going to read it? And I had some indication fairly early on that I was on the right path again. So it went to #1 on Amazon in the release week. So I'm very proud of that. I'm continuing to get nice messages from people all over the world every day who are resonating with this book. It's not just about overcoming adversity, it's about female empowerment and the difference that this man who was a child slave who grew up in poverty made to an entire village, and the ripple effects of the people that he's helped, including myself, as a result of his work. So I'm open to questions now. I thank you for listening, but suffice to say the point of this talk is you can be on a path and you can devote your whole life to it as far as you can see, and then something changes. So we're all going to have a moment in our life where we go, what do we do next? So this was my what do we do next? So thank you very much for allowing me to share a little bit of my story with you.
I'm just curious, during that time when you started to make that pivot, were you still running a motion video, or were you completely focused on?
No, we were running the business and growing the business at that point as well. And at that stage I still had regional media training. So we eventually rolled all of our businesses into emotion video, but I was balancing writing the book and running the business. So it was a bit of a juggling act. I set aside a particular day, and sometimes I wasn't in the flow that day to write, so I'd find myself getting up at 4:30 on a Sunday morning and writing. So it's not something that you can particularly structure if you're thinking about writing a book. It's good to have a bit of a plan, but you've got to be able to be flexible about it and pivot as well. And to be honest, having the business as well as the book project gave me a bit of variety, which is something that I've always liked in my life. So I think it helps do stuff to your brain if you're switching between things. It keeps you nice and nimble. So the question was, do I struggle with imposter syndrome? I feel like I'm finally getting beyond that only now. So our business is 5 years old. I've been in business for now 7 years, and lots of the times you get that little voice in your head which says, what right do you have to run a business teaching people how to make videos? What right do you have to write a book? And yeah, that chatter gets quite loud sometimes. But you know what, when you've been at the lowest of the low, and I keep going back to this moment for myself, I figured I was at the point where I thought I had nothing else to give. I was going to give up. And So when I have that imposter syndrome, I think back to that moment and I think, look at what you've just done since you thought you could do nothing. So I draw strength from that and I make the imposter syndrome go away. But it is prevalent, and particularly I think for women. We are always comparing ourselves to others. We're always having that little conversation internally about, well, why me? Why not you? Why not you?
What inspired you to write a book? Like what story specific? Maybe you could tell me what connected with this story and what's really resonating.
I think initially it was the fact that he was helping children access education. It's something that we take for granted so much in this country, and kids, you have to pretty much force them out of bed every day to go to school and convince them that this might be a good idea, that this might open doors for them in what they want to achieve in their life. And actually going there and seeing what Som had done and the impact it was having. These kids get up at dawn every day, they go running, they are part of the community, farming and doing those kinds of chores. They have a long day at school, they go 6 days a week. So when I saw that and I got to be part of it as a teacher, I thought, wow, there's a huge message for people in general around the world about the value of education and the potential for any one of us to create positive change. And I think it was that. I've always had a real sort of social equity slant to my career. My motivation for becoming a journalist wasn't politics, it wasn't crime, it was being an advocate for people and illuminating stories of importance to help add to the conversation and change people's views. So I felt really strongly about this book. So yes, it's a biography of a Nepalese man, but it's a story about the power of education. It's a story about creating generational change from seemingly nothing and nowhere. And I hope it makes people reflect on what they do and the fact that they can do more and be more and achieve more. And we're very good at putting roadblocks in the way of ourselves, but if we just try, something might actually shift and you might have a massive impact on somebody else and yourself.
Do you think there is enough being done to support the mental health of our journalists and frontline people that come across? I can only imagine back in Alice Springs today what those reporters are seeing and having to deal with and then going home.
No. So this is another reason that I love to get out and talk, because people think about police, fire, ambulance, defence personnel as the first line responders, and they are, and they're seeing this much more than journalists. But journalists, when they go to work every day, particularly news journalists in general rounds in regional places, they don't know what they're going to get. And quite often it is the bad stuff. It still continues to lead all of our news bulletins and be the front page of our newspaper. It's always the bad stuff, the more dramatic stuff. So I think it's actually improved since I left the ABC in 2017. There are EAP programs, as they are in most organisations, but I think there was really an attitude of just get on with it. Or, you know, go to the pub at the end of the week and drown your sorrows and debrief that way, which is not particularly healthy. So I think there needs to be much more awareness that journalists are also on the front line, and we need to look after their mental health. It wasn't until I had completely fallen apart and couldn't actually physically work out how to turn my computer on anymore that I realised I had to do something, i.e. stop. And while there's a little bit of support around at the time, I think we need more education around watching the signs of deteriorating mental health. And I was eventually diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I had treatment and I am better. But it had to get to that catastrophic situation before I A, stopped, and B, got help. But yeah, I think we need to do better at supporting journalists in the workforce, particularly in regional areas.
Is it safe to assume that mental health was a result of the experiences in Alice Springs and those significant events as well as what's happened in Cairns with the number of families as well.
Yeah, I think it all does chip away at your emotional resilience.
Yeah.
And you cope in the way that you can, but I think we're also much better in general now at finding other ways of coping, healthier ways of coping. So, for example, I spend a lot of time outdoors walking in the rainforest because we live somewhere beautiful, and I draw on that to be calm and to connect with people. But yes, it was not just there was obviously catastrophic incidents that triggered those symptoms, but it was in the context of a long period of exposure, sitting in the courtrooms, listening to families' testimonies about loss. I think in the courtroom once in Cairns, I was actually sitting at the designated desk for media, but the prosecutor didn't have anywhere to stash the gun that had been used in the crime, and had to interrupt halfway through to come and get it, and it was actually lying at my feet in the courtroom. So, you know, you're just constantly exposed to this kind of thing.
What drew you to Nepal when we also see significant issues with our own Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, issues that you would have seen firsthand in Alice Springs? So could you help me understand why you would go to Nepal when there's a particular economy?
Sure, and there's no denying there is a great need here as well. And I have actually been involved in that space. Part of my time in Alice Springs, I was working for the Institute for Aboriginal Development and Charles Darwin University, because I felt like if I was going to stay there for any length of time, and it was 10 years that I was in Alice Springs, I needed to be part of the effort to try and help and change things. And the Institute for Aboriginal Development was all about empowerment through education. So I had already worked in that space, and I had advocated through my journalism for change in that space. So I just thought it was a new opportunity, really, in my life, something that I hadn't been exposed to before. And as I said earlier in my presentation, I'd had that very first early exposure at my high school leaving talk to hear from Tim McCartney-Snape, who summited Everest. So maybe that planted the seed for Nepal way back when. And I also, when I worked in London for a couple of years, between Alice Springs Part 1 and 2, I struggled to get work as a journalist, and my first job over there was maitre d' of an Indian restaurant in Chelsea, and a lot of the staff were Nepalese. So I formed another connection. So it's kind of been a bit of a thread through my life. And then, of course, meeting Som while I was at the ABC in 2015 and getting to know a lot more about the country, the culture, the people, and how much they value education there. But it's just not a given. I mean, girls just didn't get to go to school in Som's village. He fought his family to send his sister Fulmaya, who now lives in Cairns, to school. She was 11 when she finally got to start her education. And it was very uncommon for girls to go to school because they were raising their younger siblings, getting married young, and having their own children and looking after their in-laws. It wasn't actually seen as necessary or relevant for girls to be educated. And of course, he's changed all of that in Batassi now. There's about 300 kids at the school now, and at least half of them are girls.
If you're into communication, I think the challenge really is to describe that in a way that is more generally well known.
Look, I think there's great inroads in that space with mental health first aid courses, but not all of us do them and know about them. So it's also being aware about what the signs are, so you can actually look at them and identify them in those who are around you, and perhaps do a bit more checking in with people to say, hey, do you want to go and have a walk or have a coffee, and just start a conversation. It doesn't have to be a conversation about mental health, but just actually walking and talking can sometimes be the catalyst for you to make those deeper inquiries and see if somebody actually does need a bigger level of help or intervention.
One of the things I love about your business is the yin and yang of you and Susie. I think it's like a match made in heaven. So perhaps for this crowd, could you give us some tips or learnings for
going from being friends to founders.
Yes, and they say never work with your friends or family, right? So it's a bit of a risk, but I think you're absolutely right. And one of the best advices I heard at the Tropical Innovation Festival was from Lucy Bloom, and she says, employ and work with people who are different to you. And Susie is very different to me. She's working hard, so she couldn't be here today. But yeah, we are completely different people. I say she's the fun one. I'm the serious one. She hates public speaking, but she's pushing herself out of the comfort zone and she's doing much more of it. And every time she does, people respond so well to what she has to say. Because like me, she just loves to give. Like, there's no use having 30 years of experience in something if you just hide it and you don't share it. That's our view. That's our business model. So we have that in common. But yeah, we work differently. I'm a morning person. She's a night owl. I like to have a real plan for everything. I like to plan a few months in advance to know that we've got income coming in. She deals with what's here today and what's happening tomorrow. So yeah, it does cause friction sometimes. And we actually pride ourselves on having at least one hard conversation a week. And I think that's been a real successful part of our business. It's almost like a challenge and we're like, oh, we haven't had that hard conversation yet. And I think it's really healthy to have different people working together because you learn something. I don't know it all, she doesn't know it all, and we've got different strengths in terms of our experience and our capability and how we relate to people. And so that works for clients as well. Sometimes we have different clients, so I tend to do most of the client onboarding and the sales of the business, and Susie does the video production side mostly and the editing, and we train together. And that's really our happy space, because every time we deliver a training, whether it's to Indigenous rangers in Central Australia or to the Liverpool City Council, people often comment about our dynamic, and we're kind of a bit like a couple in that we'll have a bit of banter, a bit of teasing. But yeah, it's like the perfect relationship because we're not the same. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, we're very, very different people, and I think that's why our business works and why we won the Collaboration of the Year award.
The advent and acceleration of generative AI, especially in the realms of art and video production, how is your business prepared to handle that, and are you embracing it or are you rebuffing it?
We are 100% embracing it. I think we have been disruptors in our industry because when we first started in motion video training and production, we got a little bit of stick from some of the local camos here who are like, what are you doing? You're taking business away. And I'm like, no, the people we're teaching video to are probably never going to hire a video production company. But why shouldn't people have the opportunity to learn how to use a tool that they have better? So we've always had that openness to change, and honestly, every time we deliver this course, it changes because the technology changes, the apps change, the AI within the apps change. So we are very flexible with our delivery and with our learning. So we do deliver to people with different levels of not just literacy but technical literacy as well. So we're constantly adapting. But Susie is very much the technical guru of our business, and she is always continually researching what the latest thing is and embracing that and helping bring that and actually make it accessible for the people that we're teaching. I just think it makes it easier for all of us to be out there making videos. So my challenge to you is to go away and make a video of something using the camera that you're already carrying around with you. Thanks again very much for having me. I really appreciate your time today.